Welcome, everybody, to another offseason breakdown. I am George, the host of the show this afternoon, and joining me is Mr. David Harrison from Locked On Washington Commanders. David, how you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good, man. I appreciate you having me on today.
No problem. I appreciate you coming back. I believe this is the third year in a row you've done this with us, so I'm not going to have to put you on the payroll, I believe, at this point.
No, we're good. We're good. I appreciate the invite, and I'm always happy to be on with you guys.
I appreciate it. So Washington Commanders, let's just jump right into this. I want to start with a little bit of actually first, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell the audience where they can support your work, how they can become an everydayer, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, like you said, I'm the host of the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And then, of course, I do my writing over on Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation, commandercountry.com primarily. But I also cover the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for both networks. So Locked On Bucks podcast and bucksgameday.com over there. And then I do a little bit of writing about the Eagles, the Texans, the Ravens, but I don't really cover them. I don't have any access. It's more so kind of seeing what other people are saying and then writing reactions and add-ons to that kind of stuff. But Commanders, Bucks, that's where you can find me.
Awesome. So I want to start real quick and without jumping deep into the politics of the sale and whatnot. This past offseason, there was a new change at the helm. Dan Snyder, after 24 years, is gone. New ownership comes in. How do you think, or will that even affect the play on the field?
I don't know how much it'll directly impact the play so much. It certainly is going to make for a little bit of a better atmosphere. The players have been willing to acknowledge that the noise and the tension and the dislike of the ownership and the circumstances going on around what the Snyder family was involved in certainly is something that is felt, right? But in a weird way, it almost kind of made them closer, right? Because every time you talk about the Washington Commanders or the Washington football team or whatever name they were going by for the moment, there was always kind of that additional thing, right? It could even be a win. The Washington Commanders upset the Philadelphia Eagles undefeated on Monday Night Football. Yeah, but their owner is, stowed away on the coast of France and refusing to talk to Congress or something crazy. So there was kind of always that, but it kind of made them tighter in the locker room. So in some ways, I mean, you can maybe say that the Dan Snyder stuff actually kind of made them a better team. You know what I mean? But certainly less stressful. Certainly for Coach Ron Rivera, something that he tried to do starting last year was just focus on the football. And I think he did a pretty good job of that. But this year, once the sale goes through, hopefully here in about 13 days, they'll be able to really focus on football because the rest of the stuff will be starting to become, put in the rearview mirror.
So speaking of focusing on football, what, in your opinion, what would you say were the biggest or most impactful free agent additions to the Commanders this offseason?
Ooh, the most impactful free agent addition for the Commanders, I think, is honestly going to be Nick Gates. I mean, Andrew Wiley is kind of like the second there. And I mean, you have this new starting off-ball linebacker, but the Jack Del Rio defense has really kind of minimized the off-ball linebacker influence. So I don't know how important that's going to be. But, the center, you have, especially with the new quarterback, no matter who wins the quote-unquote quarterback battle, you're going to have a new center. Chase Roulier was supposed to be the guy last year. They lost him in his comeback bid. And then they kind of went through 4 total centers over the course of the year. So bringing in Nick Gates from the New York Giants is going to be huge, especially if he can stay healthy. But he's kind of had this attitude. And it's funny because it reminds me a little bit of Ryan Jensen from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, where he's a super nice guy onto the side of the field or in an interview setting or just talking, informally or whatever. But then when you get on the field, he's a junkyard dog. And that's exactly what this offensive line needs. And that's going to help Sam Howell try to have a successful year as a starting quarterback if he does win the job, as we presume he will.
So speaking of Sam Howell, you said something on one of your shows recently that did not get past me. You said that Sam Howell can possibly have an RG3 type rookie season. I'm going to call it his rookie season. Technically, it's a sophomore season. You want to talk about that a little bit about how Sam Howell can have that type of a season for the Commanders this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think, so that was our mailbag question or mailbag episode. And the question that the Commanders fan sent me was, could Sam Howell have, replicate RG3's rookie year production in his first year as the total starter? So again, not really the same dynamics, but, is it possible? Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. And when you look at some of the numbers that Sam Howell was able to put up in one game and kind of realize the contextual basis for that game, right? The Washington Shortly after the end of the season, the Washington Post, Sam Fortier, really great reporter, released an article that he was kind of working on during the course of the season that involved, I want to say it was up to 14 players that spoke to Sam, under the condition of anonymity for obvious reasons, and basically talked about just how disconnected the team was with offensive coordinator Scott Turner. Well, that's all happening through the course of the season. You know what I mean? Like that's all kind of building and stewing. And Sam Howell is his 5th-round quarterback, just went through that whole ordeal from dropping from being the top quarterback in 2021 to, again, a 5th-round quarterback in 2022. And then he's the 3rd-string quarterback, elevates to the 2nd-string quarterback, and then eventually gets told he's going to start, the final week of the season. And he got told the day that we got told he was going to be the starter. So this is a dude who comes into this Dallas game with less than 7 days of really full prep and awareness. He's going to start his first NFL game, and it's the Dallas Cowboys, and it's prime time. So you don't want to blow up what he did too much, but then if you look at that experience now coming in with the entire offseason, kind of having the mindset of being the guy, he's already had all the OTA first team reps. He's had the mini camp reps. Now he's going to come into training camp. He and Eric Bieniemy seem to be hitting it off really well. These players are out there in the media. Jahan Dotson spoke to him at one of his camps, super confident in Sam Howell. Terry McLaurin is out there talking about how good this guy could be. And when you look at this is what I did on my episode for Friday. When you look at quarterbacks getting their first career start with Terry McLaurin on the field, Sam Howell actually had the best performance. Now, he didn't have the most yards and the most passes completed. When you look at the holistic and the totality of their work together, that was the best performance Terry McLaurin and a first-time starting quarterback in his career have had. So that also is promising. Would I tell you to draft him, in your fantasy league as high as you would have RG3, knowing those stats were going to come in? No, I wouldn't say that. But could he produce similar type numbers? I think with the weapons you have on this team, and when you look at the creativity of an offensive coordinator like Eric Bieniemy, he sure could. The real wild card there is how quickly is Eric Bieniemy going to get into run-heavy schemes when they have a lead? Like, is this going to be a 10-point situation where now we're just going to run the ball until it's a 1-score game again? Or, is Eric Bieniemy going to be the type of offensive coordinator who's willing to take a 10-point lead and try to stretch it to 17 by pushing the ball down the field? That's the unknown that we're really not going to know until we get into the season.
And speaking of Eric Bieniemy, what kind of offense do you think we're going to see from him? I mean, he's had Patrick Mahomes for years and Andy Reid as the head coach. Now going over to Ron Rivera and whatnot, and he's actually going to be allowed to call the plays, I presume. So what can we expect from the coaching style and the offense from Eric Bieniemy?
Yeah. I think the thing to remember that Eric Bieniemy is a running back, right? He's a running back at heart, and he's a running back coach. When he first entered the NFL, he was a running back coach from the Minnesota Vikings, coached guys like Adrian Peterson. Then he went to the Kansas City Chiefs, had guys like Jamal Charles, Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Isaiah Pacheco, those guys, not J.D. McKissick, but his name is escaping me right now. I can't. He's more of a receiving type back for the Kansas City Chiefs, so I apologize to him.
Jerick McKinnon?
Yep, there you go, Jerick McKinnon, exactly. So the key thing to look at with Eric Bieniemy is he's had experience with all different types of running backs, right? But and I know we all talk about Eric Bieniemy and Patrick Mahomes, but he's also coached with other quarterbacks in the system, in the schemes. And running backs coaches, when they're not quarterback coaches, they're not offensive coordinators. It's not like they're just unaware of what's happening, what's happening with the install, what's happening with the decision making. They're all kind of tied together, connected in different ways. Different coaches run it differently, but they are aware of what's going on with the rest of the room, right? So this is a situation where I think you're going to have a lot of read option with Sam Howell. Sam Howell is not as mobile, I would say, as Patrick Mahomes, but he certainly has a good amount of mobility himself. So I think you're going to have a lot of read option. You're going to get a lot of misdirection. You're going to get a lot of pre-snap motion to give the quarterback as much opportunity to get a beat on the defense as you can. And you're going to be as creative as the offense lets him be. And I think that's really the key here, is understanding that Eric Bieniemy's creativity is only limited by the players on the field. So if they're executing these basic packages early on in the beginning, then that'll open up the door for him to install even more complex patterns and more complex route combinations. So it's really just going to depend on that. But I think you're going to see a read option offense that likes to throw the ball short, likes to push the ball deep when they have opportunities, but only do it when it's smart to do it. And you are going to lean on the running game with your running backs, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson Jr., but also Curtis Samuel as an added piece in the backfield at times as well.
Yeah, you talked about Curtis Samuel last year when you came on, and he went out last year and surprised a lot of people, had a great year. A lot of people right now are doing like they're comparing top wide receiver cores in the NFL. I guess it's that time of the year where there's really not a whole lot to talk about, so we're just going to make stuff up. And then we had
Yeah.
and then we had Jahan Dotson go out and say that him and Terry McLaurin can compete to be the top wide receiving core in the NFL this year. What do you think about the receiving options between Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson? You got Curtis Samuel, Logan Thomas, tight end. What can we expect from that? I'm going to call it quadruplet.
Yeah. I would say, I think the Washington has maybe the best set of offensive weapons in the NFC East. Obviously, the Philadelphia Eagles have something to say about that, but when you expand it beyond just like the top 2 or top 3 receivers, I think that's where the Washington Commanders maybe start to gain a little bit of ground. I think A.J. Brown is far and away the best receiver in the NFC East, so he kind of takes that crown. But if you have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and their running backs that they've still got to kind of figure out how they're going to do everything. I know they're excited about DeAndre Swift, but this is a guy that the Detroit Lions weren't really all that sad to move on from. And then Kenneth Gainwell, we'll see what he can do to build on his postseason run. And then the tight end position, like you mentioned, there's a lot of potential there. We'll have to see if it gets proven into production. But if the Washington Commanders don't have the best offensive set of weapons in the NFCs, I think they have the second. The Dallas Cowboys obviously would like to have something to say about that, but I'm kind of a Brandon Cooks doubter. I'm not really a Brandon Cooks believer. So outside of CeeDee Lamb, they lost their top tight end. They lost one of their top 2 running backs, and the other one's coming off of a broken leg. So, the Dallas Cowboys are going to have to kind of prove it before I see it. And then the New York Giants have all kinds of problems with their playmakers outside of Saquon Barkley. So I think it's a very good unit, and I think we're in a similar situation with Washington we have been for the last few years, honestly, which is a little frustrating for Commanders fans, which is this looks like a team that if they get average or better quarterback play, they're going to compete for a playoff spot. The problem is they don't get average or better quarterback play. They oftentimes get average or subpar quarterback play, and that subpar quarterback play is what puts them out of contention.
I am going to say I do love the subtle shade that was thrown at both the Giants and the Cowboys. I absolutely love that. I would not expect anything less from somebody who covers the NFC West or the NFC East, throwing it towards the other teams in the division. I love it. Let's talk a little bit about the running backs. They didn't bring back J.D. McKissick. They let him walk in the offseason. And that kind of narrows that tree down to who's getting touches to Brian Robinson and Antonio Gibson. They did spend a draft pick on Chris Rodriguez, who I watched at the Senior Bowl. I thought he was pretty good. The thing that impressed me most about him was his pass blocking at the Senior Bowl. He was one of the few running backs that actually pass blocking actually stood out for. What's your thoughts on the running back room?
The top 2 are locked in. Brian Robinson Jr., Antonio Gibson, they kind of have their clear roles and kind of clear strengths and all of those. So it's hard because you're not expecting to get a whole lot of surprise out of these 2 guys. So it's less about surprising defenses and giving them something they're not expecting, and more so just executing what they know they're going to get from these guys really, really well so that it still works, right? And that's going to be the trick there. And I'm glad you brought up Chris Rodriguez Jr. I think standard on the depth chart right now, Jonathan Williams will kind of be your number 3 running back. And then there's the rumors that maybe Washington is looking to bring in Kareem Hunt, which would be certainly exciting if that happens. But I think Chris is a little bit of an underrated player in this offensive system. I think it's important to remember and understand that Eric Bieniemy asked for him. Like, this is a player that in the 6th round, he went to Ron Rivera and said, I want this dude on our team. And I talked to Chris, not just about his ability to run the ball between the tackles and do those things and also block, but also his ability to catch. He didn't catch a lot of balls in Kentucky, but I went back and I watched his 2022 Ole Miss game, I think it was, where he had the most catches that I saw on his stat sheet, which is only 3. But when I watched those catches, I saw a running back that had the footwork ability, the fluidity, and the concentration ability to actually have a little bit of a role in the passing game. And that is where maybe Eric Bieniemy could surprise some people, is by putting Chris Rodriguez Jr. in the backfield, maybe in a 2-back set, maybe in a big set, and actually use him off a play action or something like that as a receiver. Or he also has reps as fullbacks and as a fullback. And that's something that I think is interesting, because the Kansas City Chiefs do have packages, or did have packages, where fullbacks were involved. They just weren't kind of your traditional fullbacks. So I think that it's interesting that Chris Rodriguez Jr. is kind of this like hybrid big tight end, or big tight end, small tight end, small fullback, big running back type. And talking to special teams coach Nate Katzer, he's kind of looking at him to play a little bit of a linebacker role in special teams, which will help ensure that he gets an active roster spot. So this is a 6th round pick who could actually, in very specific spots, really make a role for himself. And everybody needs to remember too, Isaiah Pacheco was a guy that nobody saw coming until Eric Bieniemy and Andy Reid got their hands on him.
So I want to ask I got two quick questions left because I know we're on a time crunch today. Chase Young, they opted not to pick up his 5th-year option. What's going to be the status with him going forward, and how good is this defense going to be for Washington?
For Chase Young specifically, I mean, he's got to match rookie year production minimum. If he wants to get a new deal with Washington, which all signs point to that he does want to get a new deal with Washington, he's got to match his rookie year production. And I would even say he's got to go above it. I mean, double-digit sacks has to be the target. If not, you got to at least try to hit 9, 8.5, something like that. What I would do, what I've said on my show, is I would tell Montez Sweat and Chase Young both, who are coming into the season with expiring contracts, look, one of you is getting an offer. One of you is going to get let out the door. It's up to you. You go show us who the better man is and who deserves the contract. And that's how I would let it go. As far as the defense, I mean, the continuity of the players in the system with Jack Del Rio early on in OTAs and minicamp, it looks really, really good. It looks really smart, intuitive. The communication is through the roof, and they're making plays, and they're making things hard on star players like Terry McLaurin and on the quarterbacks like Sam Howell and Jacoby Brissett, which is good. It's only going to make them better. We'll see what happens when the pads go on. But right now, you have a very similar defense to what you had last year, which was 13th in the league in scoring defense. But now you add Emmanuel Forbes and Quan Martin, the 2 rookie defensive backs who are going to come in and hopefully create more takeaways. And if they can add that to their defensive weapons list, that's only going to help this team improve. And if you improve on 8-1, then you're in the green.
Yeah, they literally told 500 football, hold my beer, with the NFL moving to 17 games. Last question, and we'll get you out the door here. 2023, what is a successful season for the Washington Commanders?
I mean, given kind of where they've been, where they're coming from, and the fact that there's a new owner, coming into the building here late in July, you got to make the playoffs, and it's not just get into the playoffs, right? I want to make sure that we say that correctly. Backing into the playoffs, stumbling into the playoffs, accidentally making the playoffs, that's not going to do it. You need to go earn a playoff spot. At the end of the day, if we're playing December football or early January football in Washington, and it's, well, if this team loses, that team ties, or this team loses and Washington wins, then you get a playoff spot. That's not going to be good enough. And I would honestly even say that if Ron Rivera and his staff want to secure their future, they even need to win a wild card matchup. Now, maybe, if you get into the playoffs with 11, 12 wins and you lose in the first round, it's not going to be good, but maybe it's enough to keep you employed. But I would say that is kind of the bar that they need to have their eyes set on from a job security standpoint. But again, inside the building, they're all going to talk about next week. They're worried about training camp first, the first preseason game, getting those test runs done, and then moving on from there. They're not worried about January, February yet.
All righty. Awesome. Well, that's going to be the end of the show. Again, appreciate you coming on. Why don't you take a quick minute, tell everybody again where they can follow your work, how they can support everything that you do.
Yeah, I appreciate you, George. And if you want to hear more Commanders droning from me, then Locked On Commanders is where I do my best work. CommanderCountry.com, part of Sports Illustrated's Fan Nation. If you're interested in the Buccaneers at all, Locked On Bucks and BucksGameDay.com as well.
Awesome. And this is the end of the show. Thank everybody for joining. Appreciate you all very much. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
What's up, Title Tribe? We appreciate you watching the show. If you want to catch up on all of our college football content, make sure you subscribe to the CFB Nation by clicking their link below. Make sure you subscribe to the Toilets Titles Podcast Network by clicking our link below. And make sure to catch our other content by watching these videos to the side of me.